Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. A couple of years ago, like maybe actually a couple of decades ago, I ran into a gentleman at a Young Liberal convention, and he was the president of the Young Liberal organization. And I've been friends with him ever since, believe it or not. He's a very impressive guy, very connected in politics, very connected in business. He runs a successful public relations, public affairs, government affairs company, consulting company in Toronto and across Canada. And I ran into them the other day, and he said that he just spent an inspirational 10 days in India. And so I thought it'd be really interesting to share his trip to India and why it was so inspirational, because he went to this big conference with people from around the world that I think had an impact on him. And for a guy that's probably been to, if not 1,000, maybe 500 conferences in his life, to have one that he felt was so impactful, that's interesting. And he also met some really interesting people that he wanted to tell us about. And this gentleman has met all the prime ministers in Canada and numerous other politicians. He's been very well connected with numerous different people in politics and business. And I want to find out why these people that he met in India were so impactful to him. So Howard Brown of Brown Cohen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Brian, as always, great to see you.
Great to see you, sir. So tell us a little bit about this trip to India and the conference and what it was all about and why it was so impactful.
Well, first of all, Brian, I think the most important thing is that I was part of a very small Canadian delegation to this conference. And it was quite impressive. This organization is called Public Relations Organization International Worldwide. I've got the logo right there. I'm one of my company, Brown & Cohen Communications and Public Affairs, one of two Canadian companies that are part of it. And we've been part of it since 2010. And we go twice a year to meet partners. And the only way you get invited into this organization is you have to be invited. You have to be a leading firm in your market. They don't let just a large group in. There's usually just one or two per market. And we were delighted to be asked to join it in 2010. And what we've learned each year is we not only get great learning from it, but we meet great people. I'm glad you focus on the people. So when they decided to do it in India this year, I was a little nervous only because I'd heard stories about India being, challenging to navigate personally in terms of you got to watch what you eat, you got to watch where you go because the traffic's crazy, and all that's true.
Right, for sure.
The reason this one was so impressive, after I think I've been at 27 or 28 of their international conferences, because we do 2 a year, is this one to me brought together people who, at a point in time in world history, see it important, the relationships we built. And we're a public relations partnership. And I learned it's all about relationships like you and I have had for decades. And
but Howard, you've always been a connector, a super connector. You've always had an incredible ability to have relationships with people. What more could you, Howard Brown, ever learn about building relationships?
Well, that's a good question, Brian, and I've been thinking about that a lot. Let me show you one picture. So this was taken this week at the Taj Mahal.
The Taj Mahal.
Yeah. And it's just an incredible group of people from every part of the planet.
Right.
And I don't know if you watched Joe Biden's address last night in the House of Commons. He said the only team he hates is the Leafs. And I'm wearing a Leaf sweater right here in the middle.
That's great.
Right there. And it's funny. He said, of course, I would be sleeping alone tonight if I didn't say that, because I married a Philly girl. And the reason I'm in this international partnership is because of a relationship that I have over the last 30 years. My partner, Kim Cohen, the Cohen and the Brown & Cohen, is from Philadelphia. And, that connection last night brought things to life in two ways. Because of my connection to the U.S. and Philly through Kim. And then secondly, through this discussion in Delhi, because we're looking literally at the me wearing a Toronto Maple Leaf sweater when Joe Biden mentioned it last night. So what's the purpose of me doing the full circle on that one? It's life is full circle. You and I, our lives have crossed for decades, and I'm honored to be on your show today. And when we talked about what do I want to accomplish out of this session today, is exactly what we want to accomplish as an organization when we went to India. And it's build meaningful relationships.
Build meaningful relationships.
Build meaningful relationships, because so many relationships are hi and bye.
Yeah.
Thanks. Goodbye. But to me, what I learned is it's about relationships that are lasting. And I said to you, there's very important words. Take an interest in them, and they will take an interest in you. And I love those words. I happen to work with the Professional Engineers Ontario for the last 18 years, helping them with their government relations and public relations. And I have every one of my presentations starts with those words. You may have the greatest ideas in the world, but if they don't trust you, they don't believe you share their values, you don't believe that what you want to accomplish is what they want to accomplish, it doesn't matter. And engineers, my father-in-law, who you knew, passed away last year.
I'm sorry about that. My condolences.
Yeah, he used to say, "What do you mean? I gave him a good idea. They should just run with it." And I say, it's not that simple. You've got to build support for your ideas. And you mentioned my involvement in the Liberal Party. I was the policy chair, I don't know, a few decades ago. And I ran a campaign called Bringing People and Ideas Together. Bringing people and ideas together. And I don't mean any of these to be slogans, but I think if you think about those ideas of meaningful relationships, take an interest in them and they'll take an interest in you. These are the types of things I learned. And the people that I was with in India were some of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. And I would just do a couple shout outs. So one was our colleague from Ukraine, sharing ideas and knowledge of the challenges that the people in Ukraine are going through. Or spending time with our colleagues from the UK who, it's been a challenging few decades, last, few years for the UK with going through Brexit, a number of changes in prime ministers. And I could see, that's a country in transition. That's an important ally of Canada. And of course, the US. That is ultimately Canada's most important relationship. I think we've got 16 partners in the US in cities from, LA to New York, from Detroit to Florida. And what I see in each of those relationships, we've learned from each other. And that's where I came home feeling I learned a lot. And I think that's where I would start is, I leave there thinking, I'm an expert in this field, and I come home realizing I'm not an expert at all.
Build lasting relationships. I think that's a key. It's interesting. I remember that both Dalton McGuinty and Barack Obama had a line in their budget addresses or their State of the Union addresses during the Great Recession, and they said that we need to get goods, people, and ideas moving again. And the challenge was lots of ideas on how to get goods moving again, infrastructure, and people, jobs and stuff like that. But how do you get ideas moving again? And I think you're right. You get ideas moving again by deep personal relationships, long-term relationships where people can bang ideas off of each other and build them. And as you say, Mickey's comment about just, give them a good idea, that's not enough. You've really got to do something to mutate the idea, to reproduce the idea, to magnify the idea. There's a famous economist author in England that called it idea sex, that ideas have to have sex. They have to meet, they have to grow, they have to mutate, they have to reproduce, they have to have fun together. And that's when they become a really good idea, when they become something more. And I think that you're right, that the secret to success in that idea sex is personal relationships, and not just networking ones when all you know is the business card, but personal relationships that are deep and long-standing. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with Howard Brown in just 2 minutes. Talk a little bit more about this conference and some of the keys that came out of it, and some of his experiences in India. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Howard Brown. He is one of the co-owners of a public relations, public affairs, government affairs company in Toronto called Brown Cohen. And Howard has been someone that's been deeply involved in politics and public relations and public affairs for a long period of time. I first met him in 1976 when he was president of the Ontario New Liberals. And he's been involved in politics and stuff ever since. But and as I mentioned earlier, Howard has always had this incredible knack of making incredible, warm, strong, deep relationships with lots of different people. One of the things that always impressed me about you, Howard, is when you introduce people, you give them a little resume intro, and you tell people what they're all about as you introduce them, and so people have got something to grab onto and understand about why they're meeting someone. And that's a special skill that you've got, that you have that great memory of what everyone's doing and where they've been and what they've been up to, and then you make sure that someone else knows about it. But you say that you've gone to this conference of public relations people from around the world in India. You've gone to these conferences a couple dozen times, and that it was really impactful, and that you came away thinking that one of the answers that you got was the importance of close personal relationships. And you know, I'm surprised by that, because it's something that I thought you would have always known, but it's interesting that you would have had to learn it again and cement it in your belief. Any other big findings that came out of the conference?
Well, I think we had some really good discussions on major issues of the day. Obviously the economy. India is the fastest growing country in the world. Now 1.4 billion people. We had a presentation from the editor of one of the top magazines in the country, and talking about the growth and potential of India and what they're doing. And they call themselves the back office of the world. So I think seeing how they have built their country is interesting. They still have the challenges of rich and poor, but they also have done a very good job. And I think what I saw in them is a very happy people.
Really?
And they're always smiling. They're always nice. You know, I told you, crossing the street was like, you think you're going to get killed, and you get across, and you know, and on one street there was an elephant, there was a cow, there were about 1,000 cars, I'll say 1,000 motorcycles, and people walking all in the same street with no stoplights, no crosswalks. And yet they're happy. I never met any people so happy. And I think part of the reason they've been successful is there's a certain kindness, and you can't teach that. I think that's a really good strength that I learned about, you know, how they work together. They're graduating, you know, literally millions of engineers every day or every year. That's another part of their success. I think the second thing that I learned a lot about was we had a very good discussion on ESG, the whole area of environmental, social, and all the responsibilities of trying to be a socially responsible company. So we had a very good discussion on that. But I think it was
let's talk about those two for a second, if we could. So, you know, ESG, environment, social, and governance has been something that people have really focused on in the last little while. There's been a couple of people that have said it's gone too far, and that and companies that spend too much time and attention on it are losing sight of the bottom line and profitability and the importance of what the shareholder wants. And so it's interesting in that regard. India, you know, CBC ran a big program last week on India and garbage, and how much garbage there is, and how they've got, you know, numerous I'm not sure what they call it, but effectively, you know, poor areas where people spend their days going through landfill areas trying to find plastics and electronics and things of value, and people were, you know, dying because of methane or having sicknesses because of methane. So, you know, here you've got a country that is today the second most populous country in the world, and is probably going to become the most populous country in the world in a few years. They've got you know, garbage and some environmental issues, How did they address ESG from an environmental standpoint in India? What did they say about it?
Wow, it's so total that everywhere you go, there's garbage. And on the way home, I learned that they have this new program called Cleanup Day in India. Now, it should be every day, but October 2nd is India Cleanup Day. And they're trying to change things. But literally every single block, there is a pile of garbage everywhere. So we pulled up in our cab to what's called the Water Palace in a place called Jaipur. And it's a beautiful man-made lake with a palace built in the middle. And outside, there's vendors and people getting out of cabs to visit it. And right in front of the cab is a pile of garbage, probably 30 feet wide. And we went and did the walk and we came back, same 30 feet of garbage still there. Everybody's smiling, happy. And, when I got on the plane, I said, I want to do something. And I used to do some work with Canadian International Development Agency. And I thought, this is an opportunity to bring some Canadian expertise here. And I learned about this October 2nd being Clean India Day. And I think they're just happy people. They maybe don't even notice that the garbage is there. We did 12 hours of driving. So we went from Delhi to the Taj Mahal, 4 hours. And then the Agra, where the Taj Mahal is, over to this place, Jaipur, and then Jaipur to Delhi. So 12 hours, 4 hours each trip. There would be miles and miles and miles of garbage and miles of beauty. And I think it depended on the state or it depended on the community. And I just realized they're trying to come to grips with it, but I don't think it's part of their day-to-day DNA. I think it's something we could work on with them. I don't think they have the answer. That's a lot of people, a lot of places, and they haven't let them get it down. But it's something that came home with my goal to how can
Howard, I got another issue to talk to you about. I got to ask, did it come up at all in the conversations, the fact that India hasn't taken a position either, pro-Ukraine or pro-Russia? It's trying to stay unaligned. Like it's a pretty, for the second largest democracy or the largest democracy by population in the world, actually. How does it stay out of this, issue in regards to the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
I asked that question specifically, Brian, and what I was told was that India does not have a good relationship with China. That because of disputed territories, they've had decades of conflict, and I didn't see any great love for China on this issue, and I think I felt the same thing on no great love with Russia.
So then why aren't they being supportive of democracy in Ukraine?
I don't have that answer. I will just say this, that I think they're very internally focused. I sense that they've had historical issues with their neighbors, obviously, in Pakistan. The biggest surprise to me was when I had to fill in my visa to go, I had to say that I had not visited former sections of India, now known as Pakistan. I did not know of their conflict with China. I did not know of their relationships with Russia. In terms of the meeting the people of India, they're, I think, very interested in the Western world from a business point of view.
Yeah.
And I don't see a huge discussion in the streets of, I'm not trying to be trite in any way. I just think they're very internally focused. You can see in this, even the tourist spots, there's not a lot of tourists there. We were sometimes the only people that looked like us anywhere. So I think sometimes they don't have the exposure, more broadly. And I'm going to say that we have to work at it. And it's something I raised. I said, why is India not taking a stronger stand on being pro-Ukraine? I can tell you, we used to have a partner there from Russia, and he's no longer part of it for a variety of reasons, but mainly because a lot of the other partners had problems with some of their ethics. But I do know that this partnership is 1,000% behind Ukraine, and our Ukrainian partners treated like like heroes. We gave them last year's conference we had in Dubrovnik a full discussion on what's happening in Ukraine. So I will just say the world stands behind Ukraine. I'm very proud that Canada stands behind Ukraine, and I think if India isn't doing it yet, they should be, and I don't know why they're not. That would be probably my.
Okay. So let's go back to ESG. So, environment issues and India is an interesting place to talk about the environment and social and governance. So what came out of the conversations at this conference? It's a public relations conference. And so, one of the concerns a lot of people have about ESG and issues is that people are greenwashing, that they're just doing it for public relations purposes. They don't really actually think they're actually benefiting the environment or society or governance. They're just doing it so that people like you make us look good. What do you think? Is that people talking about greenwashing, or did they talk about the substantive things that one could do to improve ESG?
Well, that's a very, very good question. We had a panel with 5 leaders from around the world talking about ESG. A couple of them were from the US, and they said that a big issue in the US right now is the lack of interest by the Republicans, by middle America on ESG issues. And that's a concern. So they're saying, half of the world, half of markets like the US, totally committed to ESG, and half of them think it's just a crock. And I think we have to fight back and show that it's important. I think we have a long way to go on that, and I don't think anybody's trying to greenwash it. We're just trying to build understanding of it. How do you make concepts that may not be in people's day-to-day lives important? Even the word climate change, we used to call it global warming. Why do we change from climate change to global warming? How do you get the average middle American, I'll use that word, to buy into it? So I think that's an issue. I think Europe and Canada are ahead of many parts of the world on the environment. And I think we just have to chip away at it every day. I mean, we had a conference, of course, here, the COP15 in December, very successful. But it's a work in progress. I mean, these environmental conferences have been going on since Rio in 1992, Brian.
Yeah.
Why are we still discussing something as simple as cleaning up our rivers and air? The first thing you notice when you get to India is the smog. And the first thing you notice when you drive over what looked like a river is the garbage. Now, I know we did some work. The Wadi Hanifa in UAE had like a 16-kilometer bed full of everything from shopping carts to garbage. And a firm came in and they cleaned it up. I think it was 16 kilometers of just reforming the whole community. We're not celebrating. I will say the one word I will take away from the conference: we don't celebrate success enough.
Really?
We need to look at examples on ESG, on the economy, on human rights, and say, where are we doing it well? And I think that is the challenge. That's my takeaway. That's my belief, that if we don't give people examples, it's great to talk slogans, but if I can actually walk you through and say, look, there is an example how we could do it. Now, I have a specific idea. So if we could convince every single person, let's start with India, let's start with Canada, let's start with Toronto, I don't care where, and say we're going to have every day be a cleanup day. So we every year do a cleanup day, Earth Day in Toronto. Why can't every day be Earth Day? Why aren't we doing more to be conscious of our environment? Why is everything such a fight? Why do people just see things differently and not realize that we have an opportunity every day to make this a better planet, and we don't. So my take is this is something that's not just
Every day is Earth Day. Sounds like a good slogan.
Every day is Earth Day.
From a public relations expert. We're going to
Yeah.
take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Howard Brown talking about a conference for public relations people worldwide that he attended recently in India. We're talking about some of his lessons learned and also about some of his experiences in India. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
All right.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm chatting tonight with Howard Brown. He is one of the co-owners of a public relations government affairs company in Toronto called Brown Cohen. Someone I've known for just a few decades, which is shocking to be able to say that, but it's the truth. Howard, you were saying the other night when we chatted about this conference that one of the things that surprised you and that you reminded yourself of is that you always got to be open to new ideas. You know, you're an expert. You've been in politics and public relations and government affairs your whole career. Are there really new ideas that you can learn still?
Every day. There's not one day that I don't learn something new. They say you never learn a new idea after 25. And I think it's young people that always say to me, how do we tackle these tough issues of the day? One of the ones that we had discussions with some of the Americans in India was gun control. I've heard all the arguments, that we're going to take away their guns. And I just say, you know what, at some point, we got to address gun violence. How do we ratchet down the rhetoric? How do we enhance people's knowledge and comfort with people who aren't like them? How do we build bridges? I mean, I am shocked at the amount I feel I learn every day. That I thought, I know all the answers in that way. Nope. The world's changing every day, and we have to continually strive to find new answers. And what seemed like a radical idea years ago is no longer a radical idea. And I mentioned before, just a simple idea like a smoke-free Toronto was radical. Now it's accepted. How do we get concepts built that people don't feel threatened, that they don't feel that someone's trying to take away their income, their livelihood, their family, whatever it is? Had a long chat with a guy the other night. He's totally convinced that, I just pay too much taxes and nothing else matters. I think our challenge today is to get people to feel engaged and give them a decision-making power to say, okay, so you don't want to pay any more taxes, then what do you want to cut? Let's talk about it. Let's not use rhetoric. And I think that is what I'm learning, is to listen. And there was a slogan that was on the wall of our host firm, Ad Factors in India. And it says, basically, knowledge is important, but wisdom is based on listening.
Wisdom is based on listening.
Listening. And my dad used to say, God gave you 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen twice as hard as you talk. And we're so used to just talking, we don't listen, and we don't really listen. And it's important, I think, to take each person and take them seriously. A great book that's just come out, John Turner's biography by Steve Paikin, and I've quoted in it, and I talk about that John Turner, as a former prime minister, was very good at listening. He used to actually take people seriously. And I feel that when a politician, when a business person, when a parent, when a friend takes someone seriously, listens, here's what they have to say, and try to build on them and not talk over them, it's important. And what I felt when I was in India with these fabulous people, I could tell you a story about every single one of them. Every single one. In other words, 90 was told. This is only the 40 that went to the Taj Mahal. But I can tell you a story about every single one of them where they actually treated each person as if they mattered. I think if we start with that premise, Brian, it helps. Before we drill down and have a debate on whether it should be, this type of pencil or this type of pencil, that building that respect and understanding and breaking down the silos of society is challenging. you know as well as I do, in Canada here, we live in a lot of silos. How do we break them down? I think that's the challenge.
So, the comment about first seek to understand and then seek to be understood is one of those lines from I think it was the 7 Minute Manager or 1 Minute Manager or whatever it was. And I believe that. And whenever I use that line about we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, people are reminding me that we've got ears that never close and a mouth that can certainly close and keep shut. And so we can control that even more than the 2-to-1 ratio that you talked about. But it's not something a lot of people do.
Yeah.
A lot of people just want to talk and don't. And as other people are talking, they're thinking about what they're going to say and ask next rather than actually listening.
I love your words, Brian. I just wrote them down. Ears never close.
And interesting enough, they listen, in almost a 180 degree, right? All around. And so with the two, it's 360, and the mouth only goes one way. And so God really, or Mother Nature or whatever, figured it out and designed it well. And when you think about it, so many of the senses are one way. Eyesight, we see, nose, we smell, ears, we hear. It's only the mouth that really is the thing that sends the message out. So we were designed to receive a whole bunch of messages constantly, and only sort of give out the message when it's hopefully relevant and worthwhile. One of the other things that you had mentioned the other day was that international connections are important. And I understand your comment about personal relationship and deep personal relationships, and I agree with that. But your business is primarily Toronto and Canada. Why are international connections at all important?
Wow, that's a great question, Brian. It's because of shared experiences. Shared experiences. So, for example, if we want to travel around the world, I just happen to grab this magazine, Destinations of a Lifetime, by National Geographic. If we're going to go see the world and understand about it, we have to get there. So, for example, one of my clients is Turkish Airlines. You have to get there. So international connections allow you to learn. International connections allow you to grow. International connections allow you to have shared experiences. I think that's really important, that if we just stay in our own little bubble and don't take an interest. The other work we've done work probably in 10 countries around the world because people want to reach Canadians. Canadian products want to get to market. Other products want to get to Canada. It's a natural reality of the world today. I guess, 100 years ago, everything you needed was within a block. It's not that way anymore. And people are traveling and experiencing. And I think that international connection gives you that shared experience. And that's, I think, what comes down to that it's not just about me. There's no I in team. It's a matter of making sure that we've taken that one little iota of knowledge. Like I look at you, top 5% Harvard MBA, last guy to ever brag. My campaign manager when I ran for city council 30 years ago, and I said, this guy's got knowledge, but he's the last to brag. Well, you know what? It gives you strength of character, and I think everybody has strength of character, and people have qualities, and we're seldom able to say thank you. And I will just say the reason international connections are important simply and solely are that we are making sure every day that we're learning from each other. And that's what I tried to do, and that's what I'm trying to do every day.
You mentioned as well best practices. Were you able to learn best practices while you were there?
Yeah. I think best practices are, I'll give you one example of a best practice. There were several presentations that knocked my socks off. A couple of them were on food. How do you market food? So Europe wants to market their food into Asia, and they've developed a campaign promoting European food. And they did it with colors to make, when you think of colorful food, European food. Another one was done to promote a certain grain in Europe, and they were educating people on the value of this grain being more tasty. It's drilling down and educating the public using public relations. What I learned is advertising is slogans, public relations is telling stories. The other best practice.
Hold it. That's interesting. Advertising is slogans, but public relations is telling stories.
Well, let me be more specific. Advertising is just reinforcing something they may already know. But you really can't necessarily, people learn from stories first. So if they see an ad that says something that they don't believe they've heard about before, that doesn't necessarily help them understand it. But if they have read about it, know the background, how did this come about? Why am I hearing this? People are more likely to believe it. I can give you 1,000 examples of it, but it's showing that people need to have context. Advertising seldom gives you the chance in a 60-second commercial or an ad with a slogan to give you the background and why this is important. So this is why I spent years in advertising and realized advertising isn't making a difference. PR is actually explaining in bite-sized pieces in target marketing to specific audiences something that's meaningful to them. I can give you, again, a number of examples where people just would say, I don't know if I believe that. And so therefore they need a spokesperson that's relevant to them. They need to know what the background was and how it affects them. And you can't just group people. And I always say, target market is not students, but McGill MBA hockey. So if you see someone and you're a student, but you're a McGill MBA hockey student, you're more likely to have a relation with that person because you feel a connection. So I think that's our challenge, to find these little micro markets and tell stories. And that's what a big best practice is. Another one I would give you is, I've done a lot of work with brain injury. And there was an organization in Atlanta that worked with this organization called the Shepherd Center. And the Shepherd Center was founded by a family whose son had an injury, and he was, I guess, quadriplegic or paraplegic, I'm not sure which, and he was having difficulty, getting care. And this family helped raise millions and people come from around the world to this Shepherd Center now in Atlanta. And my idea was, because of my work with brain injury here in Canada, I said, why not take that concept of the Shepherd Center and put it around the world? And they were intrigued. I would have never had a chance to give them that idea. I would have never had a chance to see what they're doing. They were creative in their storytelling. And I think best practice in storytelling means you've got to drill down. You got to make sure the spokespeople that you trust, and don't assume one person they trust is another person. So I think a couple of best practices that I learned.
So build strong personal relationships, build international connections, build community, be open to new ideas, and the importance of environment, society, and governance. Sounds like it's a good list of things that you learned from your trip.
I think that's just the start. I would just say that the one you didn't include there is take an interest in them, and they'll take an interest in you. Take an interest in them, and they'll take an interest in you. And I think that is even more important.
We're going to take a break for 2 minutes, and we'll be back with Howard Brown, who just came back from India, where he attended what sounds like a pretty interesting conference. Public relations people from around the world. Stay with us, everybody.
Wow.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Howard Brown. He is a co-owner, co-founder, co-leader of Brown Cohen Public Relations and Government Affairs. A very smart guy, a very personable guy, someone that is a super connector, knows everyone. And he's just come back from a trip to India where he attended an international conference of public relations experts. And it's interesting, his sort of 5 lessons learned were building relationships. And he talks about the take an interest in people and they'll take an interest in you. International connections and the importance of not only being connected locally, but internationally, building community. And I think the line you used there, which we all love, is we have 2 eyes and in 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so we should be listening twice as much as we talk, being open to new ideas, even as you get older and more experienced in your career. You got to be open to those new ideas because they keep on coming. And interesting enough, the importance of ESG, because I do think it's important and we haven't paid enough attention. Not enough people understand it. And I think part of the problem is unless you're in it, you don't know what ESG is. And so we got to explain over and over again, environment, society, governance, and make sure that's true. Howie, I got to ask you though, sorry, Howard, not Howie. I apologize. I went back to the old nickname. What was the Taj Mahal like?
You know what? I took 800 pictures while we were away, and they had official photographer for the conference. So I only took them I only took them the days that we actually didn't have the official photographer. And the Taj Mahal was one of those days. So we arrived there the night before and stayed looking over the Taj Mahal at a beautiful hotel. And got up at 5:30 in the morning. In fact, I didn't even sleep that night. 5:30 in the morning, we're on these little golf carts going over the Taj Mahal. And there's all kinds of rules. You can't even take pictures of the actual graves that they're celebrating, or I guess they're not graves, but where the people are buried that built it. And you realize it's very historical. And we spent hours just there wandering and getting pictures from every angle. And one of the fun things was it was raining that morning, and our partner from Singapore took his camera and put it on the ground and took pictures of us so it reflected. It was a fun day. It was just the building of camaraderie you have, sharing experiences, something like that. So I think in essence, that was the combination of the learning and the private, the personal, the
relationship building,
right? The professional experience, the personal experience, because you're sharing an experience together, and that is helping build those relationships. So when I want to call my friends in the UK at Lansing's in the UK and say, hey, we should do some work on this project that I've got going, I already know them because we walked the Taj Mahal together. We had that shared experience. So frankly, the other thing I learned was they do not feature any imagery. So in their religion, they don't have any, like we might have, let's just say a Laurier house. We're celebrating Prime Minister Laurier, picture Laurier. But the people this was built for 300 years ago, there's no pictures of them. They don't believe in the amplification of the imagery of the individual. Fascinating. But it showed me the importance of architecture, landscape architecture. I do work with landscape architects across the province and country. I saw how you can make a place beautiful and how we need to treat our public spaces, our museums, our streets with care. And it's not just a highway to drive through. It's a place for people to live.
It's a place I've always wanted to go, the Taj Mahal. And I think you're right. It's a great example of architecture and public space and landscape architecture, et cetera. It's one of those dreams of mine to go there, along with the pyramids. That's spectacular that you got the opportunity to go there with some pretty interesting, important people in your life. That's our show for tonight, everybody. Howard Brown of Brown Cohen and Associates, public relations, government affairs firm.
Brian Brown and Cohen, communications and public affairs. The founding name was H.G. Brown and Associates. Interesting, you remember that. But now it's Brown and Cohen, communications, public affairs. Very proud of that part of the International Public Relations Organization, International Worldwide.
I remind you, everyone, I'm on Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos are on my website, briancrombie.com. My videos are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and LinkedIn, and my podcasts are on Apple, Audible, and Speakeasy. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Howard Brown, all the best.
Great to see you, Ryan. Thanks so much.
Good night, everybody.